Hi, everybody, and welcome to the official True Crime Online podcast. Visit truecrime-online.com today. So, today I figured I would talk about online dating because that's how I met my current husband. And on June 7th, and I better remember that date, we will be celebrating 5 years together. So, when I first started getting into the online dating thing, I was actually doing some legislative work for True.com. And if you get a chance, check them out. They are no relation to my True Crime Online book, by the way. They actually do background checks, basic background checks on their members. And that was one of the things that appealed to me, not as a person who was looking for a potential mate at the time, but they had come to me and asked if I would go and testify for what they hope would get passed would be online dating legislation that would require all online dating websites to note on their main or front page whether or not they did any kind of background checks. And their biggest opponent was Match.com. And I went to Florida the first time to testify, and I got up and I explained the work that I do with working with online victims and how we do see victims of online dating scams and online dating that has gone wrong and things like that, and said that it would just be nice for someone to have the opportunity to decide which site to go to based on what they see and whether or not that website does do some kind of a background check. And Match.com was all opposed to it, saying that that would mean that more people would go to True.com, and I rebutted saying that's not necessarily true because some people might like that maybe Match.com has more potential mates on it and they will take the chance, but at least they would know going into that website or joining it whether or not there were any background checks. And recently in the news, there was a woman who is suing Match.com right now because a man that she did meet on Match.com turned out to have quite the criminal record, ended up beating the living daylights out of her, raped her, and almost killed her. And now she's suing Match.com because they did not do any kind of background check and they didn't weed out criminals, I guess is the best way to put it. So when I had done my legislative work with True.com and I testified quite a few times for them, and the woman that I was working with from True, her name was Tara, I had lost my husband. He had killed himself. And she said, well, when you're ready to get back into the dating game, let me know and we'll give you a free profile. Because I already have a great background and I didn't mind them doing a background check on me. And I hemmed and I hawed. And finally, I said, to her one day, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do this. And she said, okay. She said, we'll set you up with a profile. Before I logged in and registered my profile, I just did a quick search to see who was available in my area. And I picked between 2 to 3 hours away. And this one face popped up. Good looking guy, but he was quite a bit younger than I was. And I was like, and he was 3 hours away, which was at my limit. And I said, oh, well, we'll see what happens. So I went on and I really, really thought about what to put into my profile. I had to come up with a subject line or your tagline. And I finally came up with, if you can't spell, don't wink at me, because one of the things was somebody could like wink or send you a wink if they thought they liked you instead of just sending you a message. And so that was my tagline or my subject line. And then I explained I was a cybercrime expert and I traveled quite a bit and did speaking engagement, trained law enforcement, and that I needed to find somebody that wouldn't mind me traveling. And I specifically stated I wanted somebody within 2, maybe 3 hours from where I lived in Maine. And I was very, very specific about this. But once I posted my profile and a couple of tasteful photos, current, I still got responses from far away. I got one from this guy in Texas who I had put in my profile that I liked Lost, and I enjoyed watching Dateline. They were doing the online predators thing, To Catch a Predator. And he wrote to me, so which one are you going to watch, Lost or To Catch a Predator? And P.S., I don't have to spell because I live in Texas. And I'm thinking, really? Does anybody not read my profile saying I don't want anybody outside of New England? I had a guy from Florida was insisting that he wanted to meet me, and he was going to be coming up to visit friends, and I just wrote back, I said, look, you live in Florida, you're just too far away. And he actually got mad at me and wrote me this nasty email, and I was just like, oh, hello, well, at least now I know what your true character is. And then there was a guy in, I think it was Montana or Wyoming or somewhere like that, and he said that he wanted to do naughty things to me bareback on a horse, and actually explicitly wrote what he wanted to do, and I showed it to one of my friends, and we kind of laughed our butts off, literally, because that was pretty funny. And I started weeding people out and weeding them out, and so I did another search, just seeing who was around there, and that guy, for 3 hours away, kept popping up. So I winked at him, and I sent him a quick message and just introduced myself. I didn't hear back from him. I did meet another guy online, and he was about 2.5 hours away, and we exchanged messages. Then we started doing phone calls, and then he and I decided to meet in Portland, Maine, which was kind of central for both of us, in a public place, which is what you should do. And I enjoyed his company, and he seemed to be okay and everything, and the phone calls got kind of steamy, and we would call probably almost every night. And in the meantime, I heard back from the first guy that I winked at, and his name was Chris, and he was 15 years younger than me, and we started off very slowly. He would take a while to answer my emails. So while I was answering his emails, I was seeing this other guy from Bangor, and this guy, I'll just call him E, decided to drive down and stay the weekend at my house, and he drove and called me and let me know, I'm an hour away, I'm a half an hour away, here I am, came in, we went out to eat, and I had a couple of friends come over, and then after they left, we were sitting in the backyard, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, he says to me, I'm not going to move down here, move in with you. I can't move my business. And I just looked at him and went, what? And we hadn't even gotten that far in any kind of relationship, if you could call it that, to even go that way. And I was just shocked, and I actually was like, whoa, what's going on here? And so he packed up he had beer and he had some food that he brought. He packed it all up in his cooler and went and he started putting in his truck, and I was really upset, and I was like, E, hello, we haven't gone that far yet. I don't know why you're freaking out. And he just got in his truck and he drove off, and I was just at a loss for words. So I let Chris know, what was going on, and he and I began talking over the phone, lots of talking over the phone, and this started in about June, end of June, beginning of July. So in the meantime, while I was dealing with E going, and Chris and I kept going back and forth on how we were going to meet, because he was having trouble with a vehicle that he had. He had to find a newer one. And in the meantime, this other guy from just north of Portland got in touch with me, and we agreed to meet for lunch down at Strawberry Bank in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at a restaurant there. And he had posted on his profile that he was 6 feet. And his photos, he looked okay. He had long hair. I don't usually go for long-haired guys. It was dark hair. And when I went to meet him, saw him in the parking lot. We walked in together, and he was very soft-spoken. I mean, it was just so much. I had to lean in and say, what was that again? And it didn't help that they had music blaring from the speakers. It wasn't bad music, but it was just, I couldn't understand him because I couldn't hear. He's very, very soft-spoken. And when we were walking in, I noticed I'm 5'6", and I had maybe 1-inch heels on. He was as tall as I was. There was no way he was 6 feet tall at all, period. His hair was kind of lanky. I don't know if it was oily. I didn't want to touch it. And in his left ear, he had an earring, and it was all like dark green around it, like he hadn't cleaned it in a long time. Pretty grossed me out. So we did our lunch, got in the car. I called a couple of my friends, and I just said, this is what happened on this. They said, you have to let him know. I said, yeah, I do. I mean, he was a nice guy and everything. He had his own business, which was great, but just not for me. So I emailed him when I got home, and he was very nice and wrote back. He said, thank you for letting me know. I feel the same way too. So that went great. So I finally got to meet Chris in August. We met at Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. public place again. That's the thing you should always do. And he turned out to be just like he described, tall, good looking, blue eyes. And I kind of fell for him right there. We had lunch, we're nervous with each other and all that. And when we parted ways, he gave me a big hug. And I kept thinking to myself, God, I wish he'd kissed me, but he didn't. So I went home and I was so excited, and we talked on the phone. And the next week, he ended up he couldn't find a newer vehicle, so he took a chance with his old one, and he actually drove down to my house at 2 in the morning. It was probably not a good choice, but I had good feelings about him, and it turned out to be what I wanted, if not more. And in September, I think it was September 15th or 16th, I invited him to go to a friend's wedding with me, be my date. And at the reception, he asked me to go outside with him because he smoked, and you can't smoke inside anywhere anymore. So we went outside, and he asked me to marry him. And almost a year later, we were married on June 7th, 2008. And a friend of mine, I'm going to show you a picture. My color printer is acting wacky today, so I couldn't print out color. But the man who married us was a retired lieutenant from the Kennebunk Police Department, and he actually got his license to marry us just because he was such a good friend of mine. I've worked with him on many cyber stalking cases, and like I said, this year we'll be celebrating our 5th year together, so it does work. So some tips: be creative in your tagline or your subject line. Be very honest in your profile that you put up, but don't get too personal and give away too much information as far as where you live and where you work and things like that. Put up some recent photos. Don't put some from far away or wearing sunglasses or anything like that. I mean, show who you really are, and don't underplay or overplay your weight, your height. If you're a little on the chunky side, say that. If you don't do that and you end up meeting the other person in person, they're going to be really disappointed, and you don't want to do that, and you don't want them to do that as well. And when you start, whether it's a wink or a nod or whatever they do on whatever website you go to, start off messaging through the website, graduate to your own personal email, start talking on the phone, and then when you feel comfortable enough and you feel like, yeah, this is the person I want to meet in person, make sure it is a public place where there are lots of other people, so that if something does go wrong, you can just walk out of there, get in your car, and go home. Also, if you want to be extra safe, is give one of your friends that can be contacted if necessary, give them a safe word like Apple or something like that, and have them call you halfway through the date, and you can say, oh yeah, those red apples were just great, and that lets her or him know that you're okay. And if it's a bad date, say orange or something, to set up some sort of system so that if it's not going good, your friend can make a fake plea, and I hate to say it, to do this, but so that you can say, hey, I have to go, it's an emergency, and get yourself out of there. And once you establish a relationship, take it slow, take it easy. And by far the most important thing is stick with people in your area. 2 to 3 hours away, even 4 hours away, but stick with someone in your area. Don't go for any of these people if you're in California and they're in Florida, or if they're in another country, because realistically, long distance relationships do not work. And even if you were willing to move to where they lived, or they were willing to move to where you live, what's to say that it's going to work out? Will they be able to find a job? Will you be able to find a job? Family issues. Stick where you live. It may take longer to find the right person, but it's worth it in the long run. And I'm probably going to go a little short because I'm getting over bronchitis and my throat's driving me crazy. But if you have any questions, send them to me at netcrimes@netcrimes.net, or if you're interested in being a guest, email me at netcrimes@netcrimes.net. I will be happy to answer questions, consider you as a guest. And this week's podcast is brought to you by Seacrest Creations. It's unique jewelry, wind chimes made from sea glass and seashells from the coast of Maine. That's jahitchcock.com/Seacrest Creations, or like the page on Facebook. And yes, it is my business, but I need to promote it somehow. And if you want more information again about my book, True Crime Online, Shocking Stories of Scamming, Stalking, Murder, and Mayhem, go to truecrime-online.com. We also have a Facebook page, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.